And what's up, Utah? Welcome back to We Are the People Radio. This is your host, Jason Preston, and my beautiful bride. How you doing, beautiful?
Did you forget my name?
No, you're supposed to. All right. My beautiful bride, Alexia. How you doing, baby?
I'm doing good.
Good. Well, we got a continuation of a very serious matter. Just let's shift gears here. And I'm really we're gonna be talking about the ritualistic abuse here in Utah, and part three. Four. We've done three. Yeah, yes, we've done 3 other shows, and so I really am going to encourage you if this is your first time looking into ritualistic abuse or hearing one of our shows on this, please stop, go back and watch the first show. It's called
Shadows of Power.
Shadows of Power. There's 3 of them, and make sure you find the first one, because the first one lays all the groundwork for what we're talking about here. Otherwise, this will not make sense, and we're building upon stories that, if you haven't watched, aren't going to make sense.
It's a tangled web.
It's insane. Honestly, it's insane. And I will tell you this: we've had so many victims approach us. We've had victims come on the show. Actually, we had so this would be the 4th show, because we had.
I wasn't
Ashley.
here.
We had Ashley on here.
Ashley Smith, yeah.
Yeah, we've had victims come and talk to us about this. So, this is something that's very real, very disturbing. And as you're going to find out, and we are lucky again to have Goel on with us today. This is tied to every level of government. When you start to learn who David Levitt is, and I think one of the things we're going to do is tie even Spencer Cox into this a little bit, which is why this stuff is needs to come out, needs to be exposed. So, anyways, thank you guys for your support. Thank you for watching. If you want to support us, you can support any of our sponsors. You can go to our website, you can buy a shirt, you can buy Patriot Punch, Innovive. But we do appreciate your support. And if you ever want to sponsor us, we are trying to raise money. Our goal is to start getting billboards so that we can take on the mainstream media and get this information out. And so right now, that's what we're trying to do, is raise money for billboards. So if you are a business and you want to support us on a higher level, we would very much appreciate that. So with that being said, why don't you welcome Goel?
Yes, we're just thrilled to have you back with us, Goel. And Goel, can you just tell everyone briefly, you have an incredible Substack. Where can they find you and your work, and how to support you?
Yeah, they can find me at 1830. That is 1830 GOEL.substack.com. It's Investigations and Ritual Abuse, and that is the Substack that I write that covers the Hamlin case, which is the current area of focus that I have, and it has been for almost 2 years now.
Well, Goel, we appreciate everything you do. And his Substack, if you want to really understand this at a deeper level, subscribe to that, because there is nobody who understands this more out there than Goel. So, Goel, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're probably one of the most requested, if not the most requested, guest on our show, just because you lay it out so well, as Jason was saying in the first one, where we just go into the high level, the people involved. Second show, where we got into the David Levitt ties. The third show, which we did with Cindy on the Glenn Pace memo. And then the 4th show, where we did with the victims, Ashley Smith. So I think you do an incredible job laying things out, explaining things, not making any assumptions, always backing it up with receipts. So we're excited to see what you have for us today.
Well, I'm definitely excited to show you. So basically, today's show is going to focus on the second family that was part of the Homeland Security investigation into ritual abuse in the state of Utah. There were 2 family groups. The first, of course, we're all familiar with, is the Hamlin group, what we have since coined as the LDS Church of Satan, because they self-designated as the Church of Satan, or the group. The second family was based out of Spanish Fork, and they consist of, roughly 4 generations that I am aware of from the civil litigation that was filed and from the materials that I've been able to obtain from law enforcement sources. And at the heart of this is a famous LDS author. She writes a lot about family issues from a Latter-day Saint perspective. family financial issues. Her name is Janine Baadsgaard. Her husband, Ross, is a former bank executive and whatnot. They're both retired, and they are currently serving a mission, I believe, in Oakland, California. So that's where we stand with today's. We're going to be focusing on the Baadsgaard family, which was the other family at the core of the Homeland Security's investigation into ritual abuse from 2019 to roughly 2020, like late 2020.
Okay.
I'm curious. We actually had someone approach us recently at an event and told us about ties to DCFS and a case in Spanish Fork. So I'd be curious to put you in touch and see if there are ties there, because there are no coincidences in this state when you see all the families involved.
DCFS figures prominently, but primarily in the state of Missouri.
Interesting.
There was an incident there, which we will be going into, because some of the children of this family, who are now adults, they fled Utah with their children to get away from this, and they relocated to Missouri. And while they were in Missouri, they were repeatedly harassed and attacked by family members who also live in Missouri. And the net result of that was that DCFS and Child Protective Services in Missouri raided their home and took custody of, I believe, 7 of their children, and then attempted to take custody of a child upon his birth. He had not yet been born, but DCFS was putting things into motion to seize custody of him as soon as he was born. With the help of an attorney named Christy Folnicki, this couple was able to prevail against that. We will be going into that later in the presentation.
And I also want to get into an update of what's going on here with the current case and Spencer Cox's role in that. Do you want to start with that, or do you want to hit that at the end?
I'm going to hit that at the end, and there will be some bombs that I'm going to throw.
All right, let's go. Buckle your seatbelts. Okay, we're turning it to you.
Do we need to give a disclaimer on this show?
No, this one's not graphic.
Okay. So.
No.
That I'm aware of.
No, so we're going to go ahead and switch over to the keynote. And we're going to try to do the full screen here. This. So you should be seeing the full screen of it.
Yeah, hit play up top in the center. That should do it. There we go.
Okay. So we're talking about the Baadsgaard case today. And the Baadsgaard case centers obviously around the Baadsgaard family. But their ties to ritual abuse go back even further, because the patriarch of the Baadsgaard family is a man named Heber Grant Wolsey. He used to be the director of public relations for the Latter-day Saints, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In that capacity in the early 80s, he crossed paths with a man that we have examined in the prior presentation, a man named Gordon Stewart Bowen. Gordon Stewart Bowen worked in the early 80s at Bonneville Communications, and during his tenure at Bonneville Communications, he worked with other individuals who have been accused of ritual abuse. These individuals include Bowen's fellow accused Church of Satan member Lincoln Kevin Kelly, who's allegedly part of the Hamlin Group, famed Latter-day Saint composer Michael McLean, who was also present at Bonneville during this time, and former church director of public relations Heber Grant Wolsey, who is the father of Janine Wolsey, who is now Janine Baadsgaard.
Wait,
there are other accusations.
Are you saying there's accusations against Michael McLean?
Yes.
As being Church of Satan?
Not being part of the Church of Satan, but being part of ritualized abuse.
And where did that accusation come from?
It came from multiple victims who tell substantially the same story. That in their programming, he used the names of composers and pieces of music to cue them to perform sexually.
So
those victims.
So does that directly
those
tie
victims
him
appear.
in? I mean, does that directly tie him in, or is that just saying that?
It's a hell of a coincidence, is what I'd say, is that he worked at Bonneville Communications with these men who were all accused of satanic ritual abuse. He has victims who have accused him of being a ritual abuser. And while he does not fit within the Hamlin victim statements in terms of somebody who was named, he fits in other ways in terms of his overall profile and the accusations against him. The article series that I am currently working on for the Substack is called The Hive. And it focuses on Bonneville Communications in the early 80s to mid 80s as a place where these people were clustered, the church media office. So these three men that I have named, Lincoln Kevin Kelly, Michael McLean, and Heber Grant Wolsey, have the largest number of allegations which investigations of ritual abuse has found to be credible. So there are other men who worked at Bonneville Communications and the church media office and other ancillary organizations, but these three are the most prominent. These are the ones that I've been able to flesh out the most in terms of accusations and corroboration. So Gordon Stewart Bowen, who is the alleged High Council Church of Satan Punisher out of Salt Lake, is a homosexual man who retained David Lee Hamlin as a therapist during the 80s and throughout the 90s and early aughts to exorcise the female demons he believed were causing his homosexuality. In his divorce deposition, Bowen's journals were used to highlight what he saw as the root of his relationship with Lincoln Kevin and Khalil Kelly, their homosexuality. In Bowen's words, he gravitated towards individuals who had issues with sexual identity. Michael McLean detailed his 9-year-long faith crisis, which he claimed began when his youngest son came out as a gay man during the effort to pass Proposition 8 in California. The McLeans were living in Malibu at the time, so it was an issue that struck close to home. Heber Grant Wolsey's granddaughter, who has accused him and others of abusing her, identifies as a queer woman. This pattern holds throughout the peripheral network of David Lee Hamlin. His mother-in-law, Karma DeYoung Anderson, was the sister by affection of Apostle Garrett Walker Gong's mother, Jean Chur Gong. Gong is one of the apostles who continues to frequently socialize and consult with Gordon Bowen on church business, often visiting Bowen's residence to play pickleball. This is despite the fact that Gordon Bowen was excommunicated in 2003 for various violations of church doctrine, including the thousands of phone calls he made to gay male escort services and his addiction to gay pornography during his marriage to ex-wife Barbara Timothy. Bowen was also accused by two of his stepsons of abuse, and he allegedly abused his biological children during the marriage and the divorce proceedings. During the divorce, it was revealed that Bowen allegedly told his wife Barbara Timothy that he wished he could nurse their newborn daughter through his penis.
Yeah, that guy's a sicko.
Bowen's alleged abuse of the Hamlin sisters was known to the church as early as 2014, as the abuse was allegedly reported to the church through the sex abuse hotline. According to the Hamlin victim statements, Karma DeYoung and her sisters detailed their...
I want to interject here.
Yeah.
I really am hoping no one's watching this without going back and watching the first episode where we go into detail about the victim statements, because if you don't have the detail from the first show, I mean, this really can sound very like, you know, like just complete slander and almost just completely out there without the proper groundwork laid. But when you have gone through the first stuff and you understand who this man is, Gordon Bowen, that guy is an absolute monster. You cannot imagine a more violent, evil monster than this guy. And so that's why, you know, when you have someone like that, you know who he is. And I think it's pretty clear who he is from the evidence out there. That's why when you have people associating with him in his involvement in the church, it's just it has to beg the question, why? So I'll let you go back.
Yeah, so according to the Hamlin victim statements, Karma DeYoung and her sisters detailed their father, Garrett DeYoung Jr.'s active involvement in human sacrifice and sexual molestation. Garrett DeYoung was the chairman he was the chair of the BYU Fine Arts Department. He was the first chair of that department. He's a notable professor. He's actually written a Latter-day Saint hymn that was performed by the Morven Tabernacle Choir. Jean Char, Garrett's mother, lived in the de Jong household with Garrett de Jong and Carmen de Jong. She traveled with de Jong and his daughter abroad. Matthew Gong, the son of Garrett Gong, identifies as a polyamorous queer Mormon. He has since left the church. During his divulging of his sexuality and whatnot, he detailed a suicide attempt during his freshman year at BYU.
And again,
so the pattern here is
this is not, we are not making accusations here either. Right? We are just giving the floor to you to hear what Goel has found and for you to do what you will with it.
Yeah. So David Lee Hamlin was a therapist who treated multiple gay Mormons, and he claimed the ability to exercise homosexual inclinations through a combination of psychological expertise and priesthood power. His method included sexual contact with his gay male patients who were told that the semen of a righteous man such as Hamlin could drive out the semen of unrighteous men, which he said was the root cause of his patients' homosexuality. Hamlin would tell his male patients that they had been ritually abused, and the semen of their male abusers was still present in their bodies and causing their homosexual attractions. If the patients rebuffed Hamlin, he allegedly engaged in outright sexual assaults of male patients during the therapy sessions. His sister, Susan Suki Hamlin, has a daughter named Nicole Dooku, who is married to a woman. Now, the point that I'm going to get to will be clear in some of the future slides. So we know from the studies that have been done that childhood abuse, physical and sexual, changes the physical structure of the brain, particularly the amygdala. These changes have a significant implication for later behavior and socialization among victims and survivors. Increasingly, research suggests that an increased prevalence of homosexuality is linked to childhood sexual abuse, as the following slides will show. I want to be very careful here. I'm not saying that childhood sexual abuse causes homosexuality. I'm saying that the studies that have been done attribute an increased prevalence of homosexuality in the population to extreme childhood sexual abuse. The abuse is also linked to riskier sexual behaviors and greater levels of self-destructive or self-harming behavior. As such, among ritual abuse groups, one would expect to see higher than expected rates of same-sex or bisexual self-identification, as well as a history of self-harm or suicidal ideation. That is exactly what we see in the ritual abuse groups being examined by investigations in ritual abuse and in the peripheral bloodlines of those groups. Not all homosexuality is caused by ritual and or sexual or physical abuse, but the research suggests that an increased prevalence of homosexual behavior and self-identification is correlated to childhood sexual abuse. So here we see the study done by Tamayo, Templer, Anderson, and Kotler. They did research with 942 adult participants. 46% of the homosexual men, in contrast to 7% of the heterosexual men, reported homosexual molestation as children. 22% of lesbian women, in contrast to 1% of heterosexual women, reported homosexual molestation. So this is groundbreaking research in the sense that, as it says, it's the first survey that has reported substantial homosexual molestation of girls. In the past, we simply did not look for this because we have assumed incorrectly, as I have uncovered in my research, that women typically don't abuse unless it's in the presence of a dominant male partner. And what we're increasingly coming to realize, especially as it pertains to ephebophilia and hebophilia, that is pubescent and late teenage victims. You see it all the time on the 6 o'clock news with female teachers and male victims. Females are much more active perpetrators than we have realized in the past. In terms of the effect of this, you have Linder King, Woldmeyer, Goldstein, Lucina, and Siege. They surveyed 327 homosexual and bisexual men. Their study focused on risk factors for HIV infection regarding a history of sexual abuse. 35.5% of their 327 men, there's 116 of them reported being sexually abused as children. Of those 116, they were more likely to have more lifetime male partners, to report more childhood stress, to have lied in the past in order to have sex, and to have had unprotected receptive anal intercourse in the past 6 months. Their conclusion was that sexual abuse remained a significant predictor of unprotected receptive anal intercourse in a logistical model adjusting for potential confounding variables. This is not controversial. We know that among heterosexual victims of sexual abuse, they are more likely to have promiscuous relationships, that is, a higher number of sexual partners, to engage in riskier sexual behavior. We are simply extrapolating that to the homosexual population in terms of the academic research that is being done. So this is not meant to slam the LGBTQIA community in any way. The people who are at fault for this are the people who molested these people as children. They're the ones who bear the blame. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
As we go on to the next slide, does maltreatment in childhood affect sexual orientation in adulthood? Roberts, Flymore, and Conan, they said that their results suggest that from half to all of the increased prevalence of childhood sexual abuse by sexual orientation minorities it may be due to sexual orientation. So they propose 3 pathways. The abuse of boys perpetrated by men causes boys to believe that they're gay. The second pathway is the abuse of girls by men leads them to be averse to sexual relationships with men. And the third pathway is abuse survivors may feel stigmatized and different from others and may therefore be more willing to behave in ways that are socially stigmatized, including acknowledging same-sex attraction or having same-sex partners. If this third pathway is the primary mechanism behind our findings, it follows that the true prevalence of same-sex sexuality is far higher than presently estimated in the surveys. Among participants with a high level of sexual abuse, 8.9% of men were gay or bisexual, and 5.1% of men or women were lesbian or bisexual, versus respectively 1.3 and 1.0% among persons not abused. So in the concluding paragraph, they note that estrogen and related neuropeptides, oxytocin and arginine vasopressin, are involved in pair bonding sexual behaviors and the expression of gender typical behavior. We know that quality of parenting affects the expression of estrogen, oxytocin, vasopressin, and their receptors in offspring, and has been hypothesized to affect later sexual behavior through epigenetic changes, particularly in the stria terminalis and the medial and amygdala brain regions that regulate social behavior. Thus, abuse and maltreatment may affect sexual orientation through biological mechanisms responsive to postnatal social environment. So, if I were to say this about the heterosexual victims, that you would expect to see higher than expected incidences of suicidal ideation and depression and promiscuity, substance abuse, so on and so forth, it would not be controversial. No one would accuse me of being heterophobic. What I am saying is the pattern that we need to focus on here is that the overall pattern of the alleged members of the LDS Church of Satan is one of a liberalized attitude towards sexual purity. That's not out of altruism towards the LGBTQIA community. The members, according to the victim statements and police reports that I've obtained, endorse and privately practice polygamy, engaging in home sealings with each other's children. These sealings are consummated via child rape immediately after the sealing is concluded. They are polyamorous, engaging in sexual rituals with each other's spouses, designed to invoke Lucifer in order to be spiritually possessed by him. They employ the same ritualistic aspect and same-sex sexual contact for the same purposes. The members publicly embrace LGBTQIA+ rights and actively work within the church for full membership up to and including temple marriages for same-sex couples. This is an extension of their belief that liberalized attitudes towards sexual conduct is a means of profaning the sacred. It is not an altruistic gesture towards homosexuals on the part of the Church of Satan. or Church of Satan adjacent LDS members. They don't care about gay people. What they care about is classifying what they see as sin as righteousness. That's their goal, is to completely destroy the church from within. They very much believe in the scriptural classification of homosexuality as immoral. They believe that, they embrace that, and that is exactly why they work to attack the church's stance doctrinally on sexual purity and on traditional marriage, because they are attempting to pervert and degrade the church. At Bonneville Communications, Gordon Bowen's homosexuality was an open secret. He routinely attributed the ransacking of his private residence to demonic spirits, but the police, when they were called, attributed the damages to homosexual lovers' spats. Bowen made sexual advances towards his male coworkers at every stop in his professional career, whether it was at Bonneville, whether it was at Ogleby Mather, whether it was McCann Erickson. He always tried to engage in sexual behavior with his male coworkers. By Lincoln Kevin Kelly's own admission, Bowen tried to make sexual advances towards him. Some of these advances allegedly crossed the line into outright sexual assault. He would fondle the genitals of his male coworkers while they were sleeping, and they would wake up to a sexual assault. That happened with a man named Adrian Pulper, according to documents from Bowen's divorce, such as deposition, and also affidavits. So we're talking about sworn testimony that details this. In light of these allegations and the evidence, the allegations against Bowen's coworkers cannot be dismissed as coincidence. As one victim put it in an interview that I conducted, quote, "These people cluster into hives at various companies, wards, stakes, and neighborhoods. Bonneville Communication was likely one of the hives for CS activities in the 80s. It was also the site of internal conflict among CS members like Heber, Wolsey, and Bowen. Bowen allegedly leveraged his relationship with the Apostle Lloyd K. Packer to have Wolsey removed as Director of Public Relations for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Wolsey then went to work as a professor at BYU before he retired. What I see time and time again in investigating these ritual abuse groups is that they have what is tantamount to civil wars among their members. And those civil wars will occasionally spill out into the public view in open conflict between men like Bowen and Wolsey. Now, in the 90s, at least two of Heber Wolsey's children accused him and his wife, Faye, of ritual abuse. The allegations at the time did not generate arrest or prosecutions. Within 3 decades, 3 of Wolsey's grandchildren would accuse their parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles of being part of a satanic ritual abuse ring. 2 of Wolsey's great-grandchildren would accuse their grandmother and an uncle of abuse. This culminated in civil litigation when the Baadsgaards sued 3 of their children for defamation. So Ross and Janine Baadsgaard are Latter-day Saints residing in Spanish Fork, Utah. Janine Baadsgaard is a prominent Latter-day Saint author. She's written many books on motherhood and family from a Latter-day Saint perspective. She is the daughter of Heber Wolsey, a former public relations executive for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ross Baadsgaard is a retired bank executive, and he and his wife are now full-time missionaries for the church. The Baadsgaards were accused of ritual abuse by 3 of their children and 2 of their grandchildren. The allegations culminated in a lawsuit.
I think that's where people just have a hard time is you look at a couple like this, they're out serving full-time mission, and then you read the allegations from their kids about the, grotesque, violent is not even putting it to mean evil. I mean, it's evilly violent. Is more than your imagination can even make up the type of stuff that these kids are talking about these people doing. And then you look at these people and you see them out there preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they're out serving as missionaries, and it is very hard to wrap your mind around, how can this be? But go on.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
So the Bible says the devil can transform himself into an angel of light. And it stands to reason that his followers would infiltrate anything holy, such as the restored church, to undermine it at every turn and to obstruct the mission of that church in bringing people back to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So this is what these people do. They blend in and they operate in plain sight. And they have the appearance of holiness, but none of the power thereof. Yeah. So the allegations went on for a few years. They culminated in a lawsuit filed by Ross and Janine against their own children for defamation. The lawsuit was dropped after the children produced a book draft written by Janine, which detailed allegations of physical abuse against Heber and Faye Wolsey, Janine's father and mother. The book also covered the allegations made by Janine's sisters against their father and mother. It turned out that over 15 years beforehand, Janine Baadsgaard had been writing a book about abuse within LDS families, and she was drawing from her own experience. I obtained a draft copy of that book from records provided to me by a law enforcement source. This is what I'm going to read to you. For years previous to that evening, siblings had been coming forward with allegations or accusations of serious abuse that occurred in our home while I was growing up. Likewise, both my father and mother were flinging jarring allegations at each other. The accusations were serious enough to warrant excommunication and jail time. There were lots of accusations, but there were no confessions. I didn't know who or what to believe. I was well aware of the abuse that I experienced while growing up, but these new allegations were new to me. I wanted to believe that these kinds of problems happen in other families, disturbing families, not mine. Yet there I was in the middle of a tumultuous storm of swirling accusations and denials. I didn't want to think about it, let alone accept the fact that serious problems could be part of my family. But I had to think about it and was forced to deal with those resulting devastating consequences. Caught in the middle of all those allegations and denials, the idealistic mirage of my family I'd clung to all of my life crashed in seemingly irreparable ruins around me. I worried if I started crying, I would never be able to stop. But the tears did come in great waves of loud, audible sobs. I was racked with horrible doubts, fears, and hundreds of unanswered questions. I had no way to know for sure what had really happened in my family. Yet I knew what had happened was bad enough to cause great mental, physical, and emotional and spiritual suffering for all of us. After that night, and as the years went on, I would hear continual and escalating accusations, followed by angry and defensive denials. My family seemed stuck forever in a state of chaos, confrontation, confusion, crisis, and contention. To this day, the accusations and denials continue. Relationships in my extended family are always a tangled web of mistrust, confusion, and estrangement. I don't know if or when the tragic family breakdown will end. I feel a deep penetrating loss for what might have been. The resulting family collapse, loss of association, trust, and love is a tragedy of unequal proportions. To me, the issue is larger than the nature of the accused or denied sins. The issue is personal refusal to assess the atonement of Jesus Christ. The Savior's offer of repentance, forgiveness, and healing is spread before us like some grand feast, yet still we starve. This was written years before this woman was accused by 3 of her own children and 2 of her grandchildren of participating in their ritual abuse and of facilitating that abuse over a number of years. The allegations closely parallel that of the Hamlin children. There are allegations of physical torture, sex trafficking, attempts to program children to comply with ritual abuse, in the Baadsgaard case through electric shock and other methods. It's a very close parallel.
Where are these testimonials at?
These testimonials are in the court records that I have in my possession.
It'd be
so I have depositions
to bring some of those, to share some of those, because we've heard the Hamblin girls. I haven't heard these other ones.
Yeah, I can do that. I did not include it in this presentation because I did not want it to be exceedingly graphic. In essence, Janine Baadsgaard denied the allegations made by her children wholeheartedly, even when she had written about similar allegations over a decade beforehand. The allegations were made by Janine's siblings against her father and mother, who were also accused by Janine's children of abuse. So Janine's own children accused their grandfather of being one of their abusers. Ross and Janine's Baadsgaard attempted to use litigation to quash the allegations made by their children and grandchildren, only to dismiss their own lawsuit when the children were able to produce the draft copy of Janine's own book detailing a familial history of abuse. Janine's own allegations against her mother detail horrific physical abuse and her father's refusal to stop the abuse.
Okay.
Janine's book was set to be...
Joel, sorry, I'm trying to track.
Wow.
So Janine's, who was the couple on a mission? Was that?
That's Ross and Janine Baadsgaard.
That is Ross and Janine. So it was Janine's book. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it was her kids.
Yeah.
It was her kids' testimony that you were sharing. Okay.
Yeah. So Janine's book was to be published by Deseret Book, but the contents resulted in the threat of litigation from her father and mother. Her father allegedly, according to the sources I talked to, used his relationship with Torch authorities, including Dolan Oaks, to quash Janine's book deal. The book was later rewritten in a third person as though Janine was recounting the abuse allegations of another individual, when in fact she was writing about her own family.
So it's a family pattern at this point.
Yeah,
even
because in two separate generations,
right,
you have the Wolsey family utilizing the threat of costly litigation to suppress allegations of ritual abuse by children within the family. So Janine Baadsgaard deployed the same tactic that her father and mother had utilized when her children alleged that she had abused them and her own grandchildren. She went to Lawfare. So the story told by Janine Baadsgaard's children is similar to that of the Hamlin children. It's a multi-general familial ritual abuse ring that sexually trafficked its children and used methodical torture and conditioning to suppress the memories of the abuse. It was ultimately unsuccessful in that respect, but what they were trying to do was to use torture and conditioning to induce compliance and also to fracture the psyches and to inhibit memory. So the Baadsgaards would find themselves as the second family of interest in a ritual abuse investigation conducted by Homeland Security Investigations employees Special Agent Adam Koneman and analyst Noel Ingalls. IRA obtained documentation from multiple sources within law enforcement of the specific allegations made by the Baadsgaard children and grandchildren pertaining to ritual abuse. For the better part of a year, we sat on those documents because we had no real way of authenticating them. And then within the last 4 months, we had a major breakthrough where we were able to authenticate that the documents were real, that they were unaltered and unedited, and that they were valid. They were from the civil suit and the surrounding investigation. So the Baadsgaard investigation, like the Hamlin investigation, was dropped when Koneman and Ingalls were taken off the cases by Steve Andres, the ASAC, that is the supervisory agent in charge out of the HSI office in Salt Lake City. As I said earlier in some of the earlier episodes, there was a special agent named Brandon Crane who had a major problem with a strategy that Koneman and Ingalls intended to employ, which was to subpoena the abuse hotline records to determine how many of the victims in the investigation had reported the allegations to the sexual abuse hotline, which runs directly to the church's law firm, Curtin McConkie. Brandon Crane was incensed about this. He went over their head to Steve Andres and said they cannot do this. Steve Andres placated him by taking the assistant U.S. attorney off of the case, and without an assistant U.S. attorney, without an attorney, a prosecutor, you can't go to court and get subpoenas or warrants. So the case was effectively kneecapped. Then COVID happened. They couldn't travel in order to interview victims, and by August 2020, they were off of the case. So Koneman has since been transferred out of Salt Lake. He has been relegated to a position in San Angelo, Texas. Ingalls was allegedly harassed to the point of resigning. When he resigned, OIG opened an investigation against him for alleged misuse of a government computer. That investigation has been concluded. OIG tried to make a criminal referral in Wyoming and in Utah. but the Department of Justice declined both times to prosecute illegals. So the investigation was closed. Ingalls, as I understand it, is currently embroiled in whistleblower litigation with HSI and the federal government. We don't have any resolution on that. Brandon Crane, the other special agent who ran interference to protect the church, he succeeded Steve Andres when Andres resigned and went to work for internal affairs at the Salt Lake Police Department. He is still the ASAP. So when we go into who Heber Grant Wolsey was, he was a son or descendant of Latter-day Saints who fled prosecution from polygamy by going north to Cardston, Alberta, Canada. These saints, like the other polygamous saints throughout the church's history, were arguably hand-selected by church authorities to engage in plural marriage. Without a recommend from a member of the first presidency or the quorum, saints could not undergo a sealing for their plural marriage. This gives credibility to the allegations made by the Hamlin sisters regarding bloodlines dating back to the earliest days of the church. What a lot of saints and a lot of people in the general public do not understand is it wasn't just anybody who was engaging in plural marriage. To have a sealing in a temple, to seal your polygamous marriage, you had to have a recommends from one of the highest ranking authorities of the church. Without that, there was no chance that you were going to take a second or a third or a fourth wife. So the church authorities were effectively selecting those who would engage in plural marriage and those who would just be relegated to monogamy. And what the Hamlin girls say is that these bloodlines are of paramount importance. And every bloodline that I've examined as part of the Hamlin case has its origins in plural marriage. All of them were practicing polygamists in the earliest days of the church. So Heber Wolsey's bloodlines were intermarried into both the Hamlin and the Levitt lines. His great-grandfather Thomas A. Wolsey Sr.'s sisters, Agatha Ann, Rachel Dora, and Emmeline Vaughn, were plural wives of John Doyle Lee, whose son John David Lee would marry Inez Louise Hamlin. Inez is the great-grandmother of Lee Patricia Udall, the wife of Joe Benyon, the alleged CS Punisher of Spring City. He is the owner of Horseshoe Mountain Pottery. He goes by the name Joe the Potter on social media. Heber Wolsey's grandfather was Thomas Wolsey Jr., whose grandson, Thomas Edward Davis, married into the Levitt bloodline via Ellen Leishman, the great-granddaughter of Thomas Rowell Levitt, brother of Lemuel S. Levitt, whose son Vincent Levitt is alleged CS conspirator and ex-Utah County attorney David Okerlund Levitt's grandfather. Thomas Rowell Levitt's son, Myron Levitt, has been accused of operating a child sexual abuse and trafficking ring out of the Blue Angel Motel in Las Vegas. I have actually talked to people who were involved in that. The bloodlines of the Levitt.
Thomas Rowell Levitt. How is Thomas Rowell Levitt related to David Levitt?
Well,
Mike Levitt.
So basically, he is the great grandfather or the great granduncle of David Levitt. So it's David Levitt, his father, Vincent Levitt, his grandfather, Lemuel S. Levitt, and then Lemuel S. Levitt's brother, Thomas Rowell. So he would be the great granduncle of David Levitt. So that's how it ties in. So the bloodlines of the Levitts and the Hamlins intersect with yet another family, the Wolsey family, which has numerous allegations of ritual abuse spanning multiple generations. And so when the federal government started to come down on the church over polygamy, the church was involved in an effort to relocate polygamous bloodlines to the colonies in Mexico or north to Cardston, Alberta, so that they could keep plural marriage alive. As director of public relations for the church, Heber Grant Wolsey had personal ties to Spencer Kimball and Gordon B. Hinckley, as well as others. When Kimball issued his famous revelation admitting blacks into the priesthood, that revelation was issued through Heber Grant Wolsey. Those relationships would prove to be key when Wolsey successfully suppressed his daughter Janine Baadsgaard's book detailing the abuse allegations within his family. Deseret Book is a wholly owned subsidiary of Deseret Management Corporation, a church-owned holding company. I have personally seen documentation that Janine Baadsgaard, in the lead up to the publication of the book, was having a meeting with Sherry Dew of Deseret Book. That they were having lunch dates together. I've seen correspondence that proves that. So after the civil suit was dismissed, Ross and Janine Baadsgaard allegedly attempted to leverage the family court system in DCFS in Missouri after their daughter and son-in-law fled to Missouri from Utah. Their daughter and son-in-law dealt with DCFS, removing their children from their home in Missouri. Lawrence County authorities then moved to seize custody of the unborn child of Ross and Janine's daughter and son-in-law before the child was even born. This was due to the fact that the family members of the son-in-law were allegedly entering the home to assault the son-in-law and daughter of Ross and Janine Baadsgaard. The son-in-law claims that his family, the Cope family, is also a ritual abuse family, and that his brothers, when he attempted to leave the cult, his brothers attempted to make contact with him. They told him he needed a ride. He said, that's just not going to happen. One of his brothers tried to break into his car, and he had to pull off and leave his brother in the parking lot. His brothers had shown up to his place of employment to do this. Later on, in the state of Missouri, members of the Cope family allegedly forcibly entered the home of the son-in-law and daughter of Ross and Janine Baadsgaard to assault them. They filed a police report and got a restraining order, but instead of dealing with that criminal behavior, Lawrence County officials removed 7 children from the home and attempted to seize an 8th child from the custody of their parents under the guise of protecting the children. The best way to protect the children would have been to deal with the people who were breaking into the home illegally and attempting to assault the parents. Ross and Janine Baadsgaard.
Well, what kind of news coverage did this get? Is this stuff that we can find in news records or any outside?
Well, I sent a link to 2 YouTube videos where this was covered at length in 2 podcast episodes done out of Missouri.
Jared and Ariana, if you could just tell people, how did you end up in this situation in the first place? Because we really didn't get into that the last time we spoke.
Yeah, sure. So both of us were raised in Utah, and in Utah, we were a part of a cult organization, and when we realized that the organization we were with had cult behavior and cult practices, we immediately began distancing ourselves from with this organization. At first, we attempted to get a restraining order against people who had harassed us and harmed us. Those attempts failed in the Utah courts.
They didn't fail in Utah courts. We didn't actually follow through with them. When we were filed for the protective order, it was against one of our minor children and family members. There was abuse reported, and we were trying to protect the kids. And prior to the hearing, we were intimidated, but in a different instance where they were trying to intimidate us to not follow through with the protective order. And so it was partly fear from the intimidation that was happening and a wish to protect our minor child from the trauma of having to testify that we just withdrew it. We never actually followed through completely on it because of what they were doing. So,
and that was at the advice of counsel.
And that was the advice of legal counsel, and just kind of considering all things considered there. So,
and to be clear, after filing for the restraining order, I was at work one day when my brothers showed up at my place of work and attempted to talk to me when I had already told them not to contact me in other way other than by email because of the situation and how severe it was. So I left work late. It was dark. I walked out the door of the building and I saw them waiting at the end of the ramp at the entrance to my workplace. And I immediately recognized them. So I walked the other way toward my car. They approached me quickly and said that they wanted to get a ride with me because they were having car trouble. I told them that's not going to happen. And I quickly got in my car, closed the door and locked it. And one of my brothers tried to open the door to get in without my permission. I immediately left and got out of the situation, thankfully. And
then filed a police report about it.
That's correct. I filed a police report because they had gone against my wishes. I told them not to contact me like that. And this happened shortly before the hearing for the restraining order. So on the advice of counsel, and in order to protect the innocent, we chose to withdraw because it was only going to become more traumatizing for everyone involved. And that's
in the courtroom when we were meeting prior to the hearing, that same brother physically intimidated me in the courtroom in front of the judge, and he had to ask him to move himself across the room and leave me alone.
And
Yes,
let me just clarify that we're talking about in a Utah court.
Yes, that's correct.
This is all in a Utah court
Okay.
before we were able to make the big move to Missouri, which we did in order to give us, some great physical distance between us and the perpetrators, so that we could hopefully get some safety.
Okay, we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, you can put that link in there because it addresses all of this. It's an incredible story, but ultimately, the son-in-law and the daughter were able to prevail with the assistance of an attorney named Christy Fulnecki. They live in fear of retaliation. They don't want their location revealed. They don't use their home address to receive mail. They've gone to extreme lengths to hide their whereabouts. Ross and Janine Baadsgaard were involved in the proceedings and characterized their daughter and son-in-law as mentally unstable liars who falsified allegations of ritual abuse. The son-in-law alleged that his family, the Copes, were also involved in ritual abuse, and that his marriage to the Baadsgaard's daughter was arranged to combine the two bloodlines. This is consistent with the allegations made by the Hamlin children, that members of the group intermarry among their family bloodlines to perpetuate the power of the bloodline and to preserve the bloodline purity. Here's one of the great coincidences. Janine Baadsgaard and her children attended the same high school, Orem High School, as alleged LDS Church of Satan member Joseph Woodbinion, Joe the Potter, the alleged punisher for the CS in Spring City, Utah. Joe Binion currently serves in his ward in Spring City in the calling where he assists missionaries.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly,
so
crazy.
Janine's sister, he had prior callings where he was over the youth.
I've heard from people down in Spring City in that area, and it's crazy that this stuff goes on.
And
there's
it's covered
no accountability
up. And it's covered up completely.
Because there's so much, again, and if you've seen the first one, I mean, it's people's jaws are dropped that this guy's just hanging out, serving in the church as, ward mission leader or whatever.
What makes it even more insane is that I have personally written reports, like summaries of the allegations against some of these people, which have been passed up to the Latter-day Church authorities, and nothing has been done.
Yeah.
As I understand it, Joe Binion briefly lost his calling, and within 2 weeks was called to another calling in the same area. That was the net extent of what's done. And Joe Binion openly advertises the fact that he is engaged in sweat lodges. He is openly engaged in the fact that he is combining Latter-day Saint theology and belief with Native American religious practices, and that he has involved himself in the course of those sweat lodges with the consumption of peyote, which is a controlled substance.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he admits. But the real stuff is the allegations from these kids and what he's done. I mean, that guy is a monster too.
Oh yeah, the sweat lodges themselves. I've talked to multiple people who said there are teenage boys and girls who attended those sweat lodges who were provided peyote, and the sweat lodges involved the participants undressing before they entered the lodge. So this is a grown man who's in his 40s and 50s during the time that this activity allegedly took place. And he's in a sweat lodge with somebody else's child.
Yeah.
Like providing them a
That
controlled substance.
That's got to be stopped. All right.
Yeah, those are the allegations against him. And the fact that he is able to persist when he openly embraces positions that are contrary to the church doctrine, it's not just the allegations against him of criminal behavior. It is the fact that throughout his life, he has always embraced positions that are doctrinally at odds with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And from what I
It
understand,
has always been his position.
You talk about how a lot of these people are very open to the LGBTQ thing. Someone told me that on his in his shop, his pottery place, he's got all the gay flags and all that flying too. So again, in alignment with what you're talking about earlier.
Yeah, very much flouting what the church teaches in terms of marriage and sexual purity, and what are the sexual norms that the church promotes, which are biblical. And he does it with impunity.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one down in Spring City doing that. So Janine's sister Mary Wolsey, who is now Mary Nielsen, has served with her husband Norman in a mission presidency. She and her husband were both named as abusers in the Baadsgaard allegation. They allegedly trafficked their nieces to multiple perpetrators.
How long is that?
And so here,
insert where it mentions them. How long is that?
How long is what insert?
Well, where they're named as abusers in the Baadsgaard allegations. How lengthy is that allegation?
Well, I've got emails and correspondence, like text and.
Is there something we can insert here?
Multiple. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be able to dig it up for you.
Let's enter that here too.
Here we have documents excerpted from the Baadsgaard lawsuit. In the upper left-hand corner, we have an email to Adam J. Koneman, the special agent in charge of the Baadsgaard and Hamblin ritual abuse allegation investigation. It details the allegation made by Jordan Baadsgaard that his aunt and uncle, Danny and Diane Shaw, were pimping or prostituting out his sisters Ashley and Ariane. He proceeds in the right side of the slide to allege that his maternal aunt and uncle, Norman Sanford Nielsen and Mary Louise Wolsey Nielsen, were part of an organized ritual abuse group that included his deceased grandparents, Heber Grant Wolsey, Fay Parrish Wolsey, and his mother, Janine Wolsey Baadsgaard, his father, Ross Esburn Baadsgaard, and others connected to his family and his community. He describes a specific instance of abuse involving electrical shock in the basement of the Norman Nielsen home in Vernal. He alleges that he was restrained in a chair while his uncle Norman administered electrical shocks to his body, and then forced him to hurt his younger sister. She was then forced to hurt him, and this created a dissociative state which impeded his ability to remember it until later in life. That is consistent with what investigations in ritual abuse has found with ritual abuse survivors over the past 2 years. In the lower left corner, we have the excerpt from the initial Baadsgaard defamation lawsuit that Ross and Janine filed against their children. It details a timeline from July to August of 2018 for Ariane Cope, their daughter. She first sent an email to Spanish Fort Detective Cody Harris detailing abuse allegations against her mother, Janine, and her brother, Joseph Baadsgaard. Specifically, she alleged that Joseph Baadsgaard had raped her at the command of her mother, Janine Baadsgaard. She then followed that up with a meeting with her father, Ross, where she claimed that she had been abused by Janine Baadsgaard's parent. That would be Heber and Fay Wolsey. and Janine's siblings, obviously Mary Sanford Nielsen or Mary Louise Wolsey Nielsen and Diane Shaw would have fit into that if Jordan Baadsgaard's allegations are to be believed. So these are excerpts from those documents provided for We Are the People Utah.
So as you can see, top left, there's Joe Binion, his senior year. Bottom left, there's Mary Wolsey. She has a circle around her face. And then 2 years behind them in the sophomore class to the top right, bottom row, there's Janine Wolsey, who's now Janine Baadsgaard. All of these people were at Orem High School in the 70s.
Yeah.
And if what the Hamlet girls are saying is correct, members of the CS move into areas where they're safer to practice their beliefs. So if this is a ritual abuse family spanning multiple generations, they would have clustered in certain areas where they already have an existing presence of like-minded individuals so that they could practice their beliefs with impunity.
Yeah,
without the risk of exposure.
What is the Edgemont Ward in Provo? I believe that they apparently there's a big group of these guys. This Church Satan.
Edgemont. It's the Edgemont stake, Edgemont North, Edgemont South, and Sharon East were the 4 stakes in and around Provo that I focused on that seemed to be inundated with this.
Okay. Interesting to drop into one of those church services.
Oh, yeah. So the patterns are obvious. Intermarriage among polygamous bloodlines dating back to the earliest days of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is directly connected with generational ritual abuse. Every single instance of organized ritual abuse that investigations in ritual abuse has uncovered over the past 2 years has its origins in polygamous family lines that go back to the early church. The bloodlines were apparently selected by the highest authorities of the church who controlled the recommends for plural sealings. When the United States federal government cracked down on polygamy, the church sent those polygamists to Mexico and Canada to perpetuate polygamy well beyond the 1890 Manifesto. The fundamentalist groups who openly practice polygamy in the present day adhere to the same principles of bloodline purity as other ritual abuse groups in order to consolidate the spiritual power of those bloodlines. This is to the point where they're just openly incestuous. The Kingston group,
think we should say some. I don't know that you can say all. In fact, I would definitely not say all polygamous groups. I think you got to be very careful there.
So if you're talking about the Kingston group and you're talking about Colorado City, Short Creek, those groups have a history of congenital birth defects that are related to the incestuous marriages and conceptions that they have health issues as a result of this. So these groups engage in the same practices of incestuous plural marriages, with girls being physically coerced and forced into marriages with older men within the group. Each of these groups...
Going back to what you just said, if they're born with these birth defects, does that mean they're more likely to be used as what we talked about, I think, in the second Shadows of Power show, as sacrificial subjects?
Yes. I mean, that's consistent with what Pam and girls have alleged. And it's consistent with the allegations that I've uncovered from other groups. So, yes, they would be susceptible to that because they would not be suitable for marriage within the group. So you have to think that from the perspective of these polygamous fundamentalist groups, girls are assets and boys are liabilities. So boys are good for free labor up to a point. When they start to reach the age where they might compete with the older men or the more established men within the group for child brides or for brides in general, they outlive their usefulness and they get kicked out of the group. And they become something called a lost boy. And lost boys in Utah are known as such because within these groups, there is no record of their existence. They don't have birth certificates or social security numbers because there's no record of them ever being born. which also makes them perfect for trafficking operations, whether it's labor trafficking, child trafficking, sex trafficking, whatever. They are perfect because they don't officially exist and their families aren't going to look for them if they go missing. That is, if they're sold to an outside group like the Hamlin group. So each of these groups, whether they're comprised of fundamentalists who broke away from the mainline LDS or active LDS members who are part of a ritual abuse group, they all believe that they're practicing the originalist LDS faith. They teach that Joseph Smith thought that plural marriage was a restoration of Old Testament practice, while also claiming that animal sacrifice was to be restored despite the Orthodox Christian position that Jesus Christ was the final sacrifice. According to dozens of victims in multiple ritual abuse groups, the restoration of sacrifice extends to human sacrifice. One of the great things about our history as Latter-day Saints is that it is so voluminous and it is so detailed. And we can go directly to the sources where the restoration of sacrifice in temples was referenced. Now, in those sources, they're talking about animal sacrifices, but for these ritual abuse groups, they're talking about human sacrifice. And they believe that that's the originalist faith that was to be restored under Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Now, I'm not saying that Joseph Smith or Brigham Young ever endorsed or practiced human sacrifice. I don't have any evidence of that.
Yeah,
but I am saying that these groups apparently believe that this is the restoration. This is what the last dispensation is supposed to be. And by engaging in these practices, they are going to hasten that dispensation and the return of Christ or Lucifer. Despite the allegations, Ross and Janine Baadsgaard are serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Lincoln, Kevin, and Khalil Kelly are serving as temple workers in the Manti Temple, despite their alleged membership in the LDS Church of Satan and their abuse of the Hamlin children.
Where are they serving? Sorry to interrupt. Where are they serving their mission? Because I would be interesting. If
I believe in Oakland, California.
Interesting. Okay.
So I believe the Baadsgaards are in Oakland, California. So I notify the leadership in the stakes down in San Pete in Manti. I've written summaries of Lincoln and Kevin and Khalil Kelly, detailing the allegations against him and detailing the fact that the Hamlin group allegedly broke into the Manti Temple after hours to conduct their satanic ordinances within that temple in the 90s. And so now you have two alleged members of this group who were set aside as temple workers after the temple was, rededicated and reopened. And that's just inexcusable. And yet, these people continue to operate in plain sight with impunity. The church continues to retain the services of Gordon Bowen, the public relations and media services, despite the decades-long allegations against him pertaining to the sexual abuse of children across multiple states. Investigations and ritual abuses repeatedly confirm that multiple apostles, in the Quorum of the 12 and in the First Presidency, routinely visit with Bowen for social and business purposes at his home. I've talked to multiple first-hand witnesses of that. David Lee Hamlin's brother-in-law, Craig Christensen, was elected to the Provo City Council. His brother, Clark Christensen, recently retired as Spring City's police and fire chief. He had previously served in Orem for 38 years, rising to the rank of sergeant in the police department. And again, Orem is where Joe Binion, Mary Christensen, or Mary Wolsey and Janine Wolsey all went to high school in the late 60s and early 70s. The wider context is that at every turn, the Hamlin case has been handicapped by a political and legal establishment that does not want the issue of ritual abuse to be examined or investigated. This is because of the issue of ritual abuse implicates many families within that establishment, such as the Levitts, the Romneys, and the Udalls, among others. This was never more apparent than when Governor Spencer Cox nominated the sole special prosecutor on the Hamlin case, Juab County Attorney Ryan Peters, to a juvenile court judgeship.
All right, I want to jump in on that. So, to those who are not following, this as closely as others, there is an active case. This is actually in, litigation. This Hamlin case with these girls if you, again, you have to read what they've been through. It's horrific. It's unimaginable. You can't even make stuff up that is horrific as what these girls experienced. Well, we've got a prosecutor on the case, and what does Spencer Cox do? He promotes the guy to a judge to shut this down. Go ahead. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so in essence, Ryan Peters was the sole deputized special prosecutor by the state AG's office. He was the only one who could serve as a special prosecutor in the Hamlin case. So Cox's actions effectively paralyzed the case for over half of the year, from October 2023 to May 2024. The Utah Court of Appeals denied the interlocutory appeal filed by the Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray, when American Fork District Judge Roger Griffin denied the motion to transfer prosecution of the case back to Utah County. So effectively, this case was without a prosecutor from October 2023 to May 2024. Now, we were successful in getting Nathan Evershed appointed as a special prosecutor by the state AG's office, but this case was on the cusp of dismissal. The current criminal case against David Lee Hamlin was on the cusp of being dismissed for failure to prosecute. And so we had to lobby the state AG's office, calling every person of influence that we knew to let them know that we wanted a special prosecutor appointed. In the case in American Fork has the victim, Emily Sheets, and 2 eyewitnesses to her abuse. That is, 2 other people who were present in the room when she was being abused. And those 2 other eyewitnesses are David Lee Hamlin's daughters, Rachel and Eliza Hamlin. They were all present. They can corroborate Emily Sheets' story. And so this ultimately comes down to who is the jury going to believe. If it goes to trial, those 3 ladies are going to tell the story of what happened to them as girls at the hand of David Lee Hamlin. And a jury will have to choose whether or not to believe their story or to believe the story of David Lee Hamlin, a man who was found by clear and convincing evidence in his divorce trial and his custody hearing to have sexually abused his 2 eldest daughters, Rachel and Eliza, back in 2003. A man who was on tape apologizing to his daughter in 2014 for raping her. Yeah.
There's
no question.
All of this comes into play. And so this case should have already gone to trial. It was slow walked for over a year and a half. And it was effectively stripped of a prosecutor by Governor Cox. Now, investigations in ritual abuse have spoken to multiple sources who allege that Governor Cox is a closeted gay man who has been confronted multiple times about his sexuality by those close to him. None of those sources have yet come to speak on the record with me.
Does that surprise you?
I have implored them.
No, but you're welcome to come on.
We will welcome anybody to come on who has confirmation of, because we've heard multiple allegations too of him, people walking in him. Nobody willing to actually come up out, I guess fear and actually put on record. But if anyone has that on record and would be willing to come on, we will protect your identity. But we would love to get that, needs to get out if that is true. If it's not true, then it needs to be squashed. But if it's true,
it's over a dozen people at this point that I've personally spoken to.
I mean, he's one of those
who have firsthand knowledge. And that's not counting the secondhand.
Yeah, honestly,
individuals.
We've had gays against groomers. We've had people who, homosexuals, and when they talk about him, gay men say, "From a gay man, I will tell you, walks like a duck, talks like a duck." But again, that's one thing to talk about. It's another thing to have actual proof, which would be nice if someone actually has that.
I am actively working on getting actual corroboration of that.
Well,
so Cox is alleged
closeted. Let's just say that he's pushed the agenda very hard in Utah.
Yeah, so his alleged closeted orientation renders him susceptible to pressure from elements who can leverage his desire to keep his orientation a secret. So they can threaten him with his positive sexual identity in order to move him to do things like strip the case of a prosecutor by nominating Ryan Peters to a judgeship. If he were an openly gay man, that's one thing. There'd be nothing to work with there. But as a closeted gay man, he is susceptible to extortion and blackmail. That's the problem. And his tenure as governor has been marked by a tightrope walking effort in which he sometimes makes overtures towards the LGBTQIA community while simultaneously kneecapping their desired reforms. So on the one hand, he's very favorable towards transgender high school athletes. On the other hand, he has obstructed the LGBTQIA agenda in other areas, much to their consternation.
I mean,
and what I would say to them is,
the net result is declaring June. He's the only Republican governor to declare June as official state gay month. I mean, you look at everything he's done.
Except for this year, because he's running for office this year.
No, he did again this year.
No, I don't think he did it this year.
No?
Yeah, because he's...
No, he didn't do it this year.
Okay, well, every other year he's done it. So, I mean, he's definitely pushed the agenda.
It's an election year.
Yep.
So.
What I would say to the gay community in Utah is very simple. He is not your ally. He's not good for this state. His agenda, he will use you as an ace in his pocket when it suits him. And as soon as you have outlived your usefulness, he'll be done with you. Yep. If you have proof that this man is a hypocrite, that he is a closeted gay man, come forward with it.
Amen.
Like, tell the truth. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we needed some disinfectant around this case and around Spencer Cox. So the Hamlin sisters repeatedly detailed their group's efforts to obtain compromising information that could be used against politicians, judges, law enforcement, and others within Utah's establishment to shield the church's statement from exposure or credibility. They talk about keeping journals of what their child prostitution clients did. And those journals were kept by their parents. The question of why Governor Cox picked the sole special prosecutor on the Hamlin case for a judgeship remains unanswered. He could have picked any licensed attorney or prosecutor in the state of Utah for that judgeship, but he picked the one attorney, the one prosecutor who was tasked and deputized as a special prosecutor on the Hamlin case. The question of why the Hamlin cases have yet to move to trial after almost 2 years of wrangling is also unanswered. One case has a victim with 2 eyewitnesses to her abuse. The jury should have already heard that case and been afforded the choice of who to believe. David Lee Hamlin or his 3 accusers in the Emily Sheets case, and his accuser in the Manti case, a former child patient of Hamlin's during his time as a therapist. So the bottom line is, these are pretty cut and dry cases. It's going to come down to who a jury believes. Do they believe David Lee Hamlin, a man who lost his license as a therapist because he was having sex with his patients and telling them that it was part of their therapy? Are they going to believe David Lee Hamlin, a man who was found by the court in his custody trial to have sexually abused his 2 eldest daughters, Rachel and Eliza, for an extended period of time? Are they going to believe David Lee Hamlin, the man who was on a recorded line apologizing to his daughter for raping her during his criminal case from 2012 to 2014? Or are they going to believe these 3 ladies, these 3 women who have come forward yet again to obtain justice against David Lee Hamlin in the current criminal case in American court? I firmly believe if this case goes to trial, there's no way a jury buys David Lee Hamlin over those 3 women.
No way.
Unless they're compromised.
Exactly.
It would have to be that, but bottom line is, we should immediately be exerting public pressure to move this case to trial as soon as possible. It should have already gone to trial.
It should have, yeah. It's ridiculous. These girls have been through what they've been through. And Gordon Bowen and all these people are still walking free because they know that they own the governor, that they own the law system. David Leavitt, the Utah County District Attorney, I mean, being able to squash this stuff, this has to be stopped. And then if we sit back and wait for our, leaders to do it, they're not going to fix this. This has to come from the people.
Yeah. So what I would say to you is, on a side note, the most recent Hamlin hearing in Manti, I went to log on to it and cover it as per usual. Only the WebEx link didn't work.
Surprise,
and that hearing was to determine whether or not Utah County could serve as a special prosecutor in that case.
Do we have an update? Go ahead.
I'm currently requesting that the court give me an audio recording of it, of that hearing. And so I should know something in the next week.
Do we know
But the bottom line is I found it really coincidental that hearing did not work via WebEx. And at first I thought it may have just been my connection. I spoke to some other people, and they said that it didn't work for them either.
Huh. When is the next hearing?
I believe it's the 9th of July.
Oh, so it's coming up.
Okay, we're going to make sure this gets published before the 9th. Is that one that we want people showing up?
We want people to show up to as many of these hearings as possible with signs. They're not going to let you inside the courtroom. They have kept us out of the courtroom multiple times. But if you show up and you make your presence known, that's going to show them that you're not letting this go away.
Okay.
And the last time everyone showed up, we actually got a prosecutor assigned, and that was also in part to the pressure that was put on the AG's office. So Sean Reyes, I will give him credit for actually stepping up and doing something there, and the people for putting pressure on him to do something.
So we're going to get this out before the 9th, and we also, Goel, why don't we stay in communication, make sure we get an email out on our end encouraging people to show up. And I would encourage you, if you're in town, if you're here, stand up for justice. I mean, take a stance in helping shape history and bringing it into, this evil that's happening in our backyards. I mean, what a chance to stand up and make a difference. Goel, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yes, I mean, everything that you just said is valid to this, is applicable to this. And what I would say to the people watching out there, it's not over unless you roll over and let them win. We've been fighting this for 2 years. And the bottom line is that the only reason it's still ongoing is because public pressure has been brought to bear to make sure that they don't get to sweep this under the rug. I would say to the people watching this, we already know the devil's ending. It's already been written. One of the things that I am really tired of is this idea that these people have some sort of special dark power or whatnot that can actually prevail in this. The only reason they prevail, the only reason they have operated with impunity is because we have allowed them to. God has given us all of the tools that we need to defeat them. And we know what their ultimate ending is. Let us hasten their ending. Let us deal them a defeat in the Hamlin case and in other ritual abuse cases, and finally deliver some sort of justice or closure to the scores of victims that they have accumulated over the years. That's what I'm asking you to do.
Awesome. Alexia?
No, I mean, just trying to follow all this and the ties and the generational trees and how everyone's connected is pretty wild. When this comes out, we just got over an election season, and sometimes you see last names and it's tied to some of the names we mentioned to, and it just raises questions. Even the election we went through last year where Christensen was reelected in Provo somehow, it makes you wonder how many are in our systems. So I'm sure we could do deeper dives. I mean, we haven't even touched on the Emily Sheets case you referenced in this presentation. You could do a whole full series just on all the intricate cases and what's involved with them. But I think this is an important time to pay attention, whether it's an election season or just daily life. Pay attention to the people in your community. Don't necessarily be skeptical of everyone, because we shouldn't live that way, especially in our churches and our communities. But I think for the people that we know there's evidence against them, we should find justice for the victims involved.
Yeah, well said, Alexia and Goel, and to our listeners. I mean, yeah, that's why we do this show. I mean, look, the media will not talk about this. The same media that will cover, that will say there's no election issues in Utah. The same media that will, protect Spencer Cox and protect the current power structure. They will not expose this. They will, in fact, if anything, they will try to sweep this under the rug. They are being used. KSL Desert News are being used as propaganda machines to keep this power structure in place. Our elected leaders are not going to fix this. And again, if you've not watched the first and second show we've done and seen the atrocities that are happening in our backyard, who's going to help these girls and these boys? It's us. It's you. It's me. And I'll tell you, especially the men out there, what does it mean to be a man? Everyone, that's a big thing. And everyone wants to be a man. It doesn't mean, it's not about having a beard and talking tough and looking buff. It's about taking care of the people around you. It's looking out for the fatherless. It's looking out for victims. And I will tell you, this is a place we need men to stand up, to show up these police places, demand of our sheriffs and our law enforcement and our judges to protect these girls, to investigate these people, and to rid these animals out of our state, because they have to be ridded out. And I'll tell you, when we get justice on one of these cases, the victim statements, that is why they want to stop this, because once you find the truth in these victim statements, all the names, the web goes out, and all of a sudden you have the potential to bring down an empire of secret combinations in your backyard. So you're living a true crime story, like the craziest crime story I've ever seen and imagined in my life, and you're living in it, and you have the chance to help play a role in it. So just the same as fighting for our country, this is what we're fighting for, is for people, for individuals. So thank you guys for your support. Goel, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all the time you invested in studying this and being informed and going after these people. And, to the people of Utah, God bless you guys. God bless America, and God bless Utah.